Hello friends, I am Sharad Vaze. Today I will be speaking on Clause 8 of Schedule 1 Part 1 to the Chartered Accountants Act 1949, Cost and Works Accountants Act 1959 as well as the Company Secretaries Act. In all the three statutes, clause number 8 is identical. Now the clause 8 reads like this. A chartered accountant in practice, here you can substitute the word cost accountant or company secretary, in practice, shall be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he accepts a position as auditor previously held by another chartered accountant or a certified auditor who has been issued certificate under the Restricted Certificate Rules 1932 without first communicating with him in writing. So it is with respect to a professional accepting the position as such when there was previously in the previous year, in the earlier year, another professional. For example, for A Limited, Mr. X was the statutory auditor of the company. Now, instead of X for the current year, Mr. Y is proposed to be appointed in the annual general meeting and accordingly he has been appointed. So for Y is an incoming auditor and for X an outgoing auditor. Similarly, in case of a listed company, Mr. P is a practicing company secretary who has done the secretarial audit for a particular year, say March 20. And for March 21 year ending, the company intends to give the assignment to company secretary Q. So in that case, Q will be incoming auditor and P will be the outgoing auditor. Likewise for cost accountants in case of cost audits. So if a professional accepts a position of an auditor when there was another auditor in the earlier period, then he must communicate in writing to the previous auditor. So what does that mean? Communication to the previous auditor is a prerequisite before accepting any new assignment, any new audit. The reasons is not only professional courtesy, but most importantly, the incoming auditor should know the reason for change in the auditor. That means what were the reasons that prompted the company or the auditee to change from A to B or from P to Q, and what are the reasons therefore, so that he gets caution or he gets advance information, intimation as to the probable problems in the new audit that he is going to accept it. So it serves two purposes. One is courtesy as well as making aware about the problems in the new client, in the new entity. Now, what does the communication implies? Communication requires positive evidence of the fact that communication is addressed to the outgoing auditor by incoming auditor reaches his hands. That means there should be positive evidence of delivery of communication to the previous auditor. Now it has got two connotations. One is it must be positively delivered, and number two is must be a written communication. That means communication orally or communication in a meeting. The previous auditor happens to meet you and in the discussion you just inform that your client is now my client. That sort of communication is not permissible. It has to be communication in writing. And what should be a positive evidence of delivery? The Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has made the procedure for communication to the previous auditor. Accordingly, it must be by a registered post. Registered post means either a speed post or a registered post acknowledgement due. That means where the postal authorities get the signature of the addressee that he has received the envelope, he has received the communication. That means that is a positive evidence of the fact that he has received it. Please note, courier is not yet allowed. Communication by email is not allowed. However, on account of COVID-19, from 1st May 2020, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, that means the Council of ICAI, has permitted communication to the previous auditor by a means of email. Now in this case, a communication by email is acceptable, but I will suggest that such communication should be digitally signed by the incoming auditor when sending an email to an outgoing auditor, because digitally signed document is acceptable as a valid document under the Information Technology Act. So instead of sending merely the email, it is preferable, it is advisable to send it with digital signature. Then the outgoing auditor should reply within a reasonable time if he has any objection. Now his communication to the incoming auditor can be in the form of email. It is permitted from last year, 1st July 2019, pre-COVID stage, but communication from outgoing to incoming, from incoming to outgoing was not allowed except during COVID situation from 1st May 2020. Fortunately or unfortunately, the sunset date is not given. That means up to which date you are allowed to communicate through email is not laid down by the Council of ICAI. Now what the outgoing auditor should communicate to the incoming auditor is, technically speaking, we do not call it NOC, but it is being called NOC in practice, but there is nothing like no objection certificate at all. The outgoing auditor can take objection if 1. His fees are outstanding. However, the decision of the council is only audit fees, if it is payable, then only an outgoing auditor can take an objection. That means the outgoing auditor has billed audit fees, say 1 lakh rupees, and tax consultation charges rupees 50,000. Then only audit fees are rupees 1 lakh. Unless that has been paid by the auditee company, the incoming auditor cannot accept the audit. Now for that, there is an exception, and that exception is in case of a company which is in existence for more than 5 years and it is a sick company. Sick company implies that its losses are more than its net worth. That means P&L debit balance is, say, 10 lakh rupees and authorized capital plus reserves is 5 lakh rupees, then it is a sick company. Earlier it had a reference to Sick Industries Companies Act. Now that reference is now more applicable. It has been simply defined as if the losses are more than net worth, it is a sick company and it is in existence for more than 5 years. Then only in that case the outgoing auditor cannot raise the issue of outstanding audit fees. That means it refers only to audit fees. Other charges, other fees payable for professional services cannot be counted, cannot be considered by the outgoing auditor. I am not saying that it need not be paid. The outgoing auditor can persuade the matter with the incoming auditor for early payment of his outstanding fees, which are other than audit fees. As to the communication, I had occasion to deal this issue at least half a dozen times before the disciplinary committee. I simply do not understand why this simple procedure of communication to the previous auditor is not followed. Because it is a simple process. Even now, email is allowed. Even earlier, write a letter, sign it, and send it by speed post. Why this simple procedure is ignored, and I have handled at least 5-6 cases of professional misconduct with respect to the previous auditor. Unnecessarily, it takes about 2-3 years to decide the issue. It has time, almost half a dozen days are lost, plus financially there is an expenditure. The matter which could have been done in 25-30 rupees in speed post, you have to spend almost 10,000-15,000 rupees for communication, transportation and professional fees payable to the council and so on. Even in one occasion I had to deal with, the communication was sent by the courier and not by a registered post. As a counsel, obviously I had to defend it. Now I raised the issue that there is a communication by courier, that means there is an improper communication, but there is no failure of communication. And number two, the requirement of communication to the previous auditor as determined by the council by registered post was laid down in 1959, and when at that time the concept of courier services were not there, or email or computers were not there at all. So in modern times, in the year 2020, the institute should modify its requirement from only registered post or speed post to email or by any other well-known recognized courier. In spite of, even I have quoted one decision of the Bombay High Court in Chris Television, that even a notice on WhatsApp is a valid service of notice. That is what the Bombay High Court has said in respect of VAT issue. So when the courts are becoming modern and modern, making use of modern technology, then why not the institute? But unfortunately, the institute the committee went by the rule book and come to the conclusion that communication is not there, and accordingly the punishment was awarded to the incoming auditor. As far my knowledge and experience goes, only a reprimand is issued to the incoming auditor. Rarely a fine or removal has taken place. Now in this situation, I feel that why there should not be a system of arbitration mechanism should be introduced. For unnecessarily it takes the time and money of both the chartered accountants, both the professionals, as well as the time, money, energy of the institute and its personnel also, as well as the committee members. The arbitration will get resolved at least 70, 80, 90% of such disputes. Or alternatively, the Code of Ethics 2019 provides it, but not yet implemented. Why not make use of the mechanism of UDIN that has been successfully going on with all the three institutes? In the UDIN, there should be communication to the outgoing auditor where you can enter the membership number, and accordingly the institute will give the information of his official email ID which is registered with the institute, and accordingly there will be communication through the mechanism of UDIN to the concerned outgoing chartered accountants. The Code of Conduct provides, but it is not yet to be implemented. It is earlier the better. That is what I feel so. Now, what can be the grounds for change of auditor? First and foremost, it is the privilege or choice of the auditee who should be his consultant, who should be his professional. It is like any other professional. Suppose as an ordinary person, I am taking the benefit of the services of one medical practitioner, say A, and if I realize that he is not taking that much of interest, or he is not diagnosing properly nowadays, or he himself is under some stress and his diagnosis is not becoming proper, or for whatever reason, if I want to change my doctor, I can change it. In the same fashion, if an auditee wants to change his auditor, it is within his right to change. But what are the reasons normally? Normally the reasons are change in management. Earlier, a particular management was there. Now the business of that company was taken over, or the company is amalgamated, merged with some other company, and the new management wants to continue with their own auditors rather than the auditors of the earlier company. Then the change will take place. Then there is one more reason nowadays for statutory rotation. Now, for instance, for a listed company, the auditors are required to be changed every 3 years. Even that concept has been brought in by the Reserve Bank of India in the appointment of auditors of urban cooperative banks as well as NBFCs, that an auditor can be appointed for a period of 3 years, and thereafter 2 terms of 3 years he will not be reappointed. That is the statutory rotation, where there has to be a change every 4th year. Or if 2 or 3 brothers are doing the business, and if the business is split for whatever reasons, and you are the auditor of all the 3 brothers A, B, C earlier when they were together, now you are the auditor of A only, then B and C will say that since you are the auditor of A, we'll have our own auditor, they will move away from you. And the last, which is again dependent upon us only, if the auditee realizes that his professional is not getting himself updated, he lacks in professional practice, in latest case laws, practices, procedures, then he will feel that it is time to change the auditor. So in these circumstances, the auditor may get changed. As to the 2 situations which were contemplated by the institute, it is regarding if the incoming auditor has sent the communication by speed post or registered post, and if you get back the envelope from the postal authorities that premises found locked. In that case, the Code of Ethics states that it shall be deemed to have been communicated to the previous auditor. The second situation is if you have sent a communication to the previous auditor and you get back your communication, your envelope, with a remark that no such office exists at this address. That means the address was, I'm not using the word bogus, was not proper, incomplete. Then in that case, the Code of Ethics states that it shall be deemed to have been delivered on the date of dispatch if address of communication is as per the records maintained with the institute. That means communication is complete when you are dispatched the letter and address should be as recorded with the institute. Then in these 2 exceptional cases, the communication is deemed to have taken place. In cases of audits, the incoming auditor has got normally sufficient time to wait for the response, but the real problem arises when the appointment is made by government authorities like Reserve Bank of India or CNAG, and we have been given time frame to complete the audit within a certain period. For example, all of us are aware that the appointment of statutory audit of bank branches is normally received in the last week of March, and we have to complete the audit by 10th of April. In that case, the communication to the previous auditor is necessary, is compulsory. There is no exception, there is no relaxation. But the auditor need not wait for the communication in reply from the outgoing auditor, or you can inform the bank that your acceptance is subject to communication from the outgoing auditor. Now, this simple procedure, if one follows, there will be no need to fight out the issues between 2 professional brothers at the committee. Thank you very much.